So with Chapter 12 of Boruto now being released for over a week, everybody started to email me basically the same exact thing. See, well, some people are asking me how I felt about the chapter, or sending me interesting theories that I haven't quite seen yet. The majority of emails I've gotten about Chapter 12 of Boruto are the exact same thing. See, because Chapter 12 did a lot of things, and a lot of things very well. However, one of the things that Chapter 12 didn't do super well was the explaining of Rasengan Uzuhiko. Now, I believe this is most likely intentional. I believe Rasengan Uzuhiko is supposed to be a big mystery until it's not. And I don't think Chapter 12 is the moment where it's supposed to not be a mystery anymore. See, because the exposition we were given explaining how Rasengan Uzuhiko works was barely exposition. All we really heard from Boruto is that he needs to keep both of his feet on the ground in order to channel the energy of the earth into his body, and that if he's able to do it for long enough, that the level of power he could reach is basically limitless. But that hasn't answered a lot of the questions that a lot of us have about this jutsu, like the how did you learn it, the why did you learn it, the who did you learn it from. But somewhat bafflingly, those aren't the questions that I've been emailed, mostly because even I wouldn't have an answer for those. No, the questions, or I guess I should say the question that I've been emailed over and over and over again is, why can't Boruto just use shadow clones to pull in the earth energy for him and have them pop like his father does in order to pull in Senjutsu chakra? And when I say I've been sent this email a bunch of times, I'm not kidding you, I've been sent this email verbatim pretty much over 10 times. And honestly, I can't blame people, because genuinely it's a really good question. Why can't, or possibly won't, Boruto pull in the Earth's energy with shadow clones and then have them disappear and have all of the Earth's energy funnel into his body? I mean, because for all intents and purposes, everything that we know about Rasengan Uzuhiko seems to function in the exact same way as Sage Mode, with the only difference being that to pull in Senjutsu chakra, you need to sit down and hold your hands together like this, and to pull in the Earth's chakra, you need to have both of your feet on the ground. But in either circumstance, you need to be standing entirely still, pulling in an energy of sorts. And since whatever happens to a shadow clone also happens to the creator of the shadow clone, and the chakra of a shadow clone always returns to the user after that shadow clone is destroyed, then it would stand to reason that Boruto should also be able to pull in the Earth's energy through the shadow clone trick that his father made famous. And yet in Chapter 12, and in all the previous chapters where Boruto was using Rasengan Uzuhiko, he never did that. So the prevailing question is why? And while we can't necessarily know for certain, because Rasengan Uzuhiko is still a massive question mark, really when it boils down to it, if you want to answer this question, there's only 3 ways to go about it. Either Boruto can't use shadow clones to gather the Earth's energy, or he won't use shadow clones to gather the Earth's energy. And I'd say, quite honestly, all 3 of these possibilities are equally possible, and all for very different reasons. And thus today, we're going to be talking about all 3 of these possibilities to finally answer the question that you've all wanted me to answer: why isn't Boruto using shadow clones to pull in the Earth's energy? Because today we're talking the Rasengan Uzuhiko's major weakness explained. But before we get to explaining anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you like the idea of me answering questions that you have about your other favorite anime and manga, go ahead and follow my other channel, The Weeb Commander, where instead of talking about Naruto and Boruto, I talk all other anime and manga. If you want to see me try to bring real-life challenges to the anime world, go ahead and follow my brand new channel that I created with Stephen He, Chris Barnett, and Danny Mata, called Anime IRL. Or if you just want to hear me talk about anime, go ahead and follow my anime podcast, Talkers Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. But before we get into all that today, guys, first we gotta talk about a brand new sponsor to the page, Fume. Fume is trying to create a healthy alternative to smoking and vaping. And that healthy alternative is the flavored air category. See, Fume is trying to initiate a change that will revolutionize people's health choices. And when it comes to the flavored air category, there is nobody better than Fume. Fume is an award-winning flavored air device. It helps you draw flavor to your mouth, filling the void that ditching a bad habit can leave, making sure you still have something to reach for. But Fume isn't a vape, it's just air. As such, there's no vapor, no smoke, no nicotine, so it's not addictive. And all the flavors are non-toxic, so it's a completely guilt-free option. On top of that, it's powered by your breath, so no batteries needed. And I must say, the wood and metal design makes it look kind of awesome. It's heavy, it feels good in your hand, it twists, which is kind of fun for those of you who like to fidget, and it comes with a magnetic holder that you can spin it on, and trust me when I say I play with this all day. And so, if hitting a vape is like drinking a sticky soda, then using the flavor cores, of which Fume has a ton of, is more like drinking an herbal tea, like crisp mint, sparkling grapefruit, or maple pepper. And my personal favorite is crisp mint. It's like walking around with gummin. It's a cool, refreshing hit of mint to the mouth. So if you or a loved one has a bad habit you're trying to kick, I can recommend nothing higher than Fume. And once you buy in, you'll join the ranks of 300,000 other customers on their way to a success story. And enter the code NCHammer at checkout, or use the QR code on screen right now to get a free Fume base with your order of the Journey Pack. And in no time, you'll be spinning just like me. So Nick, is Boruto in Earth Sage now? Is it possible that Boruto's tapping into Hashirama Sage mode because Hashirama was never seen putting his hands together, but his feet were always firmly planted on his wood release? I don't know, guys. I don't have any more answers than you do. But I'll tell you right now, Boruto is not a sage. But Nick, why are we even having this discussion in the first place? How is there this much confusion revolving, all pun intended, around the Rasengan Uzuhiko? Well, because objectively, Kishimoto made it work exactly like Sage Mode. What do you mean, Nick? Well, unfortunately, Kishimoto is a lot of things, and creative is one of those things. Just not like all the time. Because when you really crack into the power system of Naruto, basically all of the powers operate under 4 principles. Elemental, punchy, but it costs you your life. I'm splitting my body with something else, and that makes me infinitely powerful, and some form of Sage Mode. But there's a lot of room to wiggle in those 4 categories. I guess healing is also the 5th category, but I don't know if you'd call that a power. And Kishimoto does do a fair amount of wiggling in those 4 categories, and therefore there's a ton of very interesting and very different powers in the Naruto universe. But unfortunately, Rasengan Uzuhiko isn't really one of those. See, from the jump, Rasengan Uzuhiko has kind of been catching its Sage Mode strays. Now, it's mostly because the second they were introduced to Rasengan Uzuhiko, both Daemon and Boruto say that it's using the power of the earth. I guess technically, to be more specific, they say that it's using the earth's chakra. And if you know anything about Sage Mode, you know that Sage Mode is also basically just using the earth's chakra. As in order to use Sage Mode, you need to pull in nature energy, and nature energy exists in everything that comes from the earth. Water, trees, dirt, rocks, and by blending that nature energy with your own, you create Senjutsu chakra, which is super powered, super useful chakra. And thus, when Naruto and Daemon started referring to the Rasengan Uzuhiko as a move powered by the Earth's chakra, pretty much anybody who knew anything about Naruto was trained in their mind to look at it and go, oh, okay, so like nature energy? So it's Sage Mode? But basically everything we've learned about Rasengan Uzuhiko points to the fact that it isn't nature energy and that it's not Sage Mode. Because, well, yes, it would make some semblance of sense for Naruto to come back from the time skip with a form of Sage Mode, considering the fact that his teacher was Kashin Koji, a perfect Toad Sage who may or may not have a standing connection with Mount Mubuko, and thus for Boruto to come back after training with Kashin Koji, talking about how he has a move that taps into the world's chakra, kind of makes you think, oh, okay, so he's a sage now, kind of like Naruto. However, when Boruto activates his Rasengan Uzuhiko, he doesn't gain any marks. And while sure, you could technically make the argument that the more perfect a sage you are, the less change your body goes through, and therefore Boruto could just be the most perfect sage we've ever seen, which wouldn't be crazy considering everything else he's accomplished. But considering the fact that both Naruto and Minato were known as perfect sages, and they got the orange pigmentation and an eye color change, kind of makes you think that that's what a perfect Toad Sage would look like. Unless Boruto is some kind of perfect-er Toad Sage. But there does seem to be a clear distinction between Rasengan Uzuhiko and any semblance of a Sage Mode, Hashirama's included. That goes far beyond just even the concept that he doesn't awaken to any marks when he activates his Rasengan Uzuhiko. And that is that Rasengan Uzuhiko seems to be the only thing that the earth energy seems to supplement. See, any kind of Sage Mode, be it Hashirama's, Mitsuki's, Naruto, or Minato's, is a very multifaceted tool. It boosts your chakra reserves, it improves your ability to heal, it improves your perception and speed, and it also allows you access to jutsu you previously didn't have access to. Rasengan Uzuhiko doesn't seem to do any of those, outside of the access to a jutsu you couldn't do before thing, because obviously it's Rasengan Uzuhiko. But then why have Rasengan Uzuhiko be so eerily similar to Sage Mode? Well, unfortunately, I don't necessarily have an answer for that outside of the fact that Kishimoto's not as creative as some of us want him to be. On top of that, there's a possibility that Kishimoto's trying to draw a direct line between Boruto and his father, or possibly even his grandfather. But if Rasengan Uzuhiko is in some form of Sage Mode and nature energy isn't the Earth's chakra, then where are we drawing the line here? Well, honestly, if I had to give you an answer, I'd say that the line is drawn actually right where the earth begins. See, I believe that there is actually a clear difference between nature energy and the earth's chakra. See, because nature energy refers to the chakra that exists inside of living things. Trees, bugs, animals, grass, all that. And since all of these life forms have energy, everything on top of the planet is overbrimming with life force. And thus that life force can be brought into a sage's body, mixed with their own chakra, and turned into Senjutsu chakra. However, I believe chapter 12 does a pretty good job of differentiating what earth's chakra is in opposition to nature energy, as the Earth's chakra seems to talk more about the Earth itself, not what's grown on top of it, more the giant spinning rock that just so happens to sustain life. See, rather than accessing the energy that exists on the surface of the planet, Boruto accessing the Earth's chakra more speaks to him accessing the chakra of the planet that all of that life is growing on. On top of that, it also seems to imply that Boruto is absorbing the centrifugal force of the planet's rotation into the equation of the power he's absorbing. And thus, if you really want to think about it in the simplest of terms, Boruto is deriving his energy from the big old rock we all stand on and its spin. But just the absorption of some form of nature energy isn't the only connection between Sage Mode and Rasengan Uzuhiko. No, because the point has been much more vexing to your average Boruto fan who's trying to conceptualize how these two things are different is the fact that in chapter 12, Boruto revealed that he needs to keep both his feet on the ground at all points in order to pull in the Earth's chakra. And the more time that Boruto is given to pull in that Earth's chakra, the more energy he's able to release with Rasengan Uzuhiko. So basically, exactly how Sage Mode works. And while different sages go about the collection of Senjutsu chakra in different ways, with Jugo's clan having an innate ability to pull in nature chakra while walking around, Hashirama controlling and moving on giant wooden constructs that allow for him to stand still while he pulls in nature energy and does all of his fighting with his wood, and Naruto making several shadow clones who collect nature energy far away from where the battle is, and whenever Naruto needs a shot in the arm of Senjutsu chakra, he pops one of them. Now, of all of the ways to gather Senjutsu chakra, this is the most reproducible. All you need is 1, 2, 3, 1,000 shadow clones somewhere off in the distance, gathering Senjutsu chakra for you, and then when they disappear and you need a shot in the arm of chakra, you get it. Because obviously Boruto doesn't have access to Jugo's clan's family Kekkei Genkai or Hashirama's wood release. And that's one of the most prevailing questions coming out of chapter 12, at least in my email inbox, is that since these two forms of power-ups are so similar, why isn't Boruto following the footsteps of his father? And those answers fall into 3 camps. Can't, doesn't know, and won't. And while a lot of those camps sound somewhat similar to each other, trust me when I say they're all very different. So let's get into the first camp. Can't. Now, this possible answer as to why Boruto isn't using shadow clones basically says that the shadow clone technique wouldn't work for the transference of Earth's chakra. But why, and what does that mean? Well, yes, of course, we fully understand that Naruto's able to make shadow clones, and those shadow clones can gather chakra for him, and when they disappear, since experiences between shadow clones and the creator are universally shared, that chakra will transfer back to Naruto. And thus, if we're really going by the letter of the law, it would make sense that that rule would be applied to the transference of Earth chakra, because so far as we know, it should operate exactly the same as nature energy, except for the fact that it might not. See, here's the thing. There's a pretty key difference between Sage Mode and the Rasengan Uzuhiko. See, what we know about Sage Mode is that it requires the mixing of nature chakra with your own, and thus inherently those who have mastered Sage Mode are able to access more chakra. But the key thing to talk about here is the mixing of 2 chakras to increase a total chakra pool. The reason that caveat is so incredibly important is that, well, yes, the experience is experienced by all shadow clones is unanimous and is transferred back to the main user. Within the capacity of Sage Mode, the only reason that Naruto gets the Sage chakra that his shadow clones created by melding it with their own is because technically those clones are melding nature chakra with Naruto's chakra. And since the chakra used by a shadow clone is returned to the user upon the shadow clone's disappearance, Naruto is getting more chakra back from every shadow clone that pops. This may not be the case with Rasengan Uzuhiko. See, while yes, in chapter 12, Boruto said that he needed to keep both his feet on the ground in order to absorb the Earth's chakra and channel it into Rasengan Uzuhiko. But Rasengan Uzuhiko works in a very cosmetically different way than Sage Mode. See, those who pull in Senjutsu chakra undergo their Sage Mode transformation. Naruto gets his orange and his frog eyes, Jiraiya gets warts and a weird nose, Hashirama gets his swirlies, and so on and so forth. However, Boruto doesn't undergo any cosmetic changes outside of the fact that chakra begins to swirl around him. Not in him, but around him. And this might be the key differentiating factor. See, earlier when we talked about the fact that Rasengan Uzuhiko doesn't seem to confer any of the added benefits of Sage Mode outside of the addition of a new jutsu you can use, the real reason that that might be happening is because the Earth's chakra isn't entering Boruto's system, but rather simply circling around him. And thus, in a sense, Boruto's need to be connected to the ground through his 2 feet might mean that Boruto's actually acting more as a drill than a battery being charged. Boruto Boruto could be acting as a siphon to reach deep down into the core of the earth and pull out some of the most latent and powerful chakra that he then surrounds himself with and channels into an attack in Rasengan Uzuhiko, which would mean that chakra would technically never enter Boruto's system. And thus, if hypothetically Boruto was to create an army of shadow clones that were all channeling the power of the earth, the second those shadow clones disappeared, so would the chakra.
Oh wait, but Nick, no, the experience is shared by everyone. One shadow clone channeling chakra should transfer back to Boruto the second that it's done.
No. Not necessarily. Yes, things like knowledge and training and chakra that you enter into your chakra circulatory system go back to the shadow clone creator. But that's only because those are things that you're entering into your brain and your chakra circulatory system. And since chakra is the life force of all beings and always flows back to its origin point, anything you introduce to that chakra in the form of a shadow clone, because that's just what shadow clones are, your chakra split off from you, will come back to you. Yes. But if you're just punching a hole in the ground and covering yourself in the chakra that's spewing out, and then using that chakra that you're covered in to channel it into a big attack, there's no proof that when you disappear, that chakra you're covered in is gonna go back to the original user. In fact, I'd reckon there's actually a plethora of proof to prove that exact point. Because if hypothetically, after a shadow clone was covered in chakra and it disappeared, if that chakra transferred to the original shadow clone creator, that would mean that every single time Naruto's had a shadow clone that got hit with Amaterasu, the Amaterasu should have come back to Naruto. And thus, fundamentally, if this is how the Earth's chakra works, then that chakra transferring back to Boruto would kind of fly in the face of everything we know about shadow clones. Because if Boruto is just covering himself in the chakra of the planet, then that's fundamentally no different from him being covered in the chakra of somebody else. And if you had to worry about the chakra that your shadow clones got covered in every single time you sent one of them out, because if they disappear with somebody else's chakra on them, it'll come back to you, then boy oh boy, would shadow clones be used way less. Naruto would be dead 1,000 times over. But maybe that's not how the Earth's chakra works. Maybe the Earth's chakra does enter into Boruto's chakra circulatory system, in which case we do still very much have the question of why isn't he using shadow clones? Which brings us to our second camp. Doesn't know. Now, this is pretty much the easiest to explain camp. It's rather simple. This just plays with the idea that Boruto doesn't know he could be using shadow clones to gather the Earth's chakra.
But Nick, how could he possibly not know to do that? He's a genius after all.
Well, yeah, he is a genius, but that doesn't mean he knows everything.
But Nick, he grew up in the same household as Naruto. How could he not know that? Naruto does it all the time.
No, he doesn't. At least not anymore. Naruto hasn't really used shadow clones to gather Sage Chakra for him since Shippuden. And even then, that was like early Shippuden. Pretty much as soon as Naruto hit the war arc, he never used shadow clones to gather his Senjutsu Chakra anymore. But why, you ask? Oh, I don't know. Maybe the giant superpowered fox in his stomach that never needs to move? Because Naruto, by the time that the 4th Great Shinobi World War comes around, teaches Kurama how to gather in Senjutsu Chakra. And since Kurama's chakra reserves are basically limitless, Kurama's able to infuse a basically limitless amount of nature chakra into Naruto, all at the low cost of nothing, because Kurama never leaves the inside of Naruto until the last. And thus, since Kurama's just sitting there not really doing anything outside of being a battery anyways, he might as well clasp his hands together and become a better battery. And thus Naruto hasn't employed this strategy basically in Boruto's entire lifetime. And Naruto is the only sage alive outside of Kabuto, kind of Orochimaru, and Mitsuki, all of whom are snake sages, which just fundamentally works different. And thus really nobody on Earth is creating shadow clones to try and pull in Senjutsu Chakra for them, and thus we really have no reason to assume that Boruto would know how to. It's not like Naruto's around to teach him. On top of that, shadow clones are not at the front of the mind for Boruto like they are for Naruto. Boruto, pre-time skip, can only make 4 shadow clones, and we actually haven't seen him use a shadow clone since the time skip happened. On top of this, Jiraiya, who Kashin Koji is a clone of, never employed the shadow clone will pull in the Senjutsu Chakra thing for you, because he would just fuse Ma and Pa to himself. So the only person who ever went about gathering Senjutsu Chakra through the medium of shadow clones was Naruto, because of his massive chakra pool and the fact that he can make thousands of them. And thus there's really nobody in Boruto's life who would point him in the direction of using shadow clones to pull in the Earth's chakra. But there's also the rather interesting point that Boruto hasn't used the shadow clone in the first 12 chapters of Two Blue Vortex, and he's been in 3 very important fights. So why isn't Boruto using shadow clones at all, whether or not he's trying to get them to pull in Earth Chakra or just help him in combat? Because while Boruto certainly didn't use shadow clones as often as Naruto in part 1 of Boruto, he did certainly use them a fair amount. Was it every fight? No, not necessarily, but it was definitely more than once every 3 fights, and Boruto's 0 for 3 right now. And thus that brings us to our third camp. won't. See, there is a solid possibility that Boruto understands that he could use shadow clones to pull in earth energy for him, have them disappear, and channel the entire power of the earth into a singular punch. I mean, after all, Boruto is an unrequited genius. He's probably the most intelligent and most competent ninja we've ever seen. So how hasn't he been able to crack the code of making what is now his signature jutsu and the strongest jutsu we've ever seen out of omnipotence more powerful and more accessible? Well, there is a possibility that he knows, and that he could do that, but he won't do it. And that explanation could tie into the fact that Boruto hasn't used the Shadow Clone in the first 12 chapters of Two Blue Vortex. See, like we already know, Boruto's karma marking is unstable right now, as just merely resonating with Kawaki's karma marking and having it manifest to his mid-forearm made Boruto fly into a panic and have to hide from combat. Boruto had to spend several chapters trying to force his karma marking back down. Like, the sheer thought that his karma marking would awaken terrified him and possibly would put the entire village in danger. But we still don't necessarily have an answer for why that's the case. Why is the idea of Boruto's karma marking activating so incredibly dangerous? And while I don't have the answer for that right now, there is a possibility that Boruto, by splitting his chakra among shadow clones, would have less control of his karma marking. Because think about it, there's been plenty of times in the Naruto universe where when somebody is less than optimal, they've lost control of their body. When Naruto flew into a rage, Kurama would take over his body. When Gaara fell asleep, Shukaku would take over his body. When Tsunade exhausts all of the chakra of her strength of 100 seal, her body returns to that of an old, frail woman. And the most important example from all of those things is that whenever Boruto ran out of chakra in part 1 of Boruto, Momoshiki would take over his body. And thus a Boruto, who currently has the least control over his karma marking he's seemingly ever had, was to split up his chakra into halves or fourths or eighths. He would run a massive risk of having Momoshiki or possibly Shibai take over his body. And thus, while it is a possibility that Boruto could use shadow clones to gather the Earth's chakra, there's also a possibility that doing so will put him and everyone around him in a massive amount of danger. And thus the real reason that Boruto hasn't been using shadow clones to strengthen and quicken Rasengan Uzuhiko isn't because he can't or doesn't know, but because he won't. He won't risk Momoshiki taking over his body again through the usage of shadow clones. And amongst these three options, I genuinely believe won't is the most likely. Kishimoto has spent the entirety of Two Blue Vortex trying to separate Boruto from Naruto as much as possible. And if Boruto now has an affliction that doesn't allow for him to use shadow clones, then that's pretty much the greatest way you could separate him from his father. But I'm curious to hear from you guys. Of these three possibilities, which do you believe is the most likely? Or do you believe there's a fourth possibility that I'm not quite keyed into? Tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. For all of my homies out there trying to increase their critical reading analysis skills, can't, won't, and doesn't know are three really good questions to ask yourself whenever you're wondering why a character isn't doing something.